May 40 here. A decent rule of thumb for trying to figure out life and big picture issues that are beyond one's own expertise is, what's the company that I'm in? And I do not like the company on the conspiracy side with regard to the shooting of Donald Trump. I much prefer the company of those who say it was incompetence rather than maliciousness. So decent rule of thumb is like, figure out who is in your corner when you're making a particular argument. And the U.S. Secret Service has now apparently requested the Trump campaign not hold outdoor rallies. And I think this is entirely legitimate. To the best of my knowledge, from what I've read, Donald Trump didn't do much to improve the United States Secret Service. He may have even left it in worse shape than when he took office. I don't see any evidence that Joe Biden improved the Secret Service. So the overall efficiency of the U.S. Secret Service and its incompetence that was on display last Saturday night with the Donald Trump shooting, that lies with the Joe Biden administration, right? They selected the incompetent head of the Secret Service. They ran the United States government for 3.5 years, right? That lack of competence on Saturday night is primarily on the Biden administration and the people that they selected to run the Secret Service. Here's Laura Ingraham.
Powerful political effect. The Secret Service is reportedly telling him, stop doing them.
Okay, I think this is cheap fear-mongering, cheap point scoring. All right, securing outdoor venues is far more difficult than securing indoor venues. And the United States Secret Service is stretched thin in large part because of Donald Trump. He did nothing to secure the resources the Secret Service needs when he was in power. So I think this is a legitimate request by the Secret Service. I don't think this is malicious.
Washington Post says that the Trump team is now scouting indoor venues like basketball arenas for future events. Well, that would obviously severely limit the former president's reach in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, life frequently severely limits you. Your enemies frequently will severely limit you. And guess who wins out when you go to war with reality? Because you don't believe that reality has served you up a fair dish. You don't like the reduction in opportunities that reality has served you, and so you decide to go to war with reality. Well, reality is going to win out. Right? These are the facts on the ground. Right? It is not good for Donald Trump's health to hold outdoor rallies.
And frankly, it's a kind of a gift to the Harris campaign. But whatever the case, this is a tacit admission by the Secret Service that they are unable to protect Donald Trump. Joining me now, Tim Miller, former Secret Service agent who served on President Bill Clinton's detail, and Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. Tim, now given this lack of transparency now, 10 days after the assassination, even with Cheadle's resignation, are you surprised tonight that many Americans are wondering, is it that they can't protect him outside, or is there something else going on here?
Well, let me just say this. What happened Friday a week ago?
Okay, that was an incredibly tendentious way of framing things. It's not the Secret Service can't protect him. You're making the job of the Secret Service far more difficult.
Goes every Secret Service's agent's nightmare.
Saturday,
we clearly demonstrated, that we are missing some key components. And here's the reality, Laura. The Secret Service should be able to protect any protectee anywhere they go. But I do think that there have been systematic problems with Director Cheadle. You look not too long ago, how many 37 Secret Service agents at risk of their own jobs stepped forward and said, hey, we can't do the mission. So the Secret Service right now needs dynamic, powerful, focused leadership, because the bad news is there's so many great and sacrificial agents, men and women across this country that are willing to do what you saw, cover their protectees.
You need a change in culture, right? You need a more masculine culture if you want excellence. And so DEI runs against a culture that promotes excellence. Where exactly does DEI promote excellence?
And make sure they're safe to have fair and free elections.
Well, we love everybody who puts their lives on the line. There's no doubt about that. But Congresswoman Luna, these rallies are big for Trump. And they're like 40 or 50,000 people when they get to their biggest, or sometimes even, I guess, larger. This is going to have an effect on the
Most
campaign,
certainly.
perhaps.
Okay, so this idea that Secret Service agents are putting their lives on the line, do we have much evidence that this is a particularly hazardous type of duty? Did you know that when you drive to work tomorrow morning, you are putting your life on the line, right? Driving to work is far more dangerous to you than working a day as a Secret Service agent, right? How many Secret Service agents have been killed in the line of duty? We have about 30,000 Americans who die each day on the roads in traffic accidents, another 20,000 pedestrians that die each year. So crossing a major intersection in a major metropolis, you are putting your life on the line. So let's not overpraise the United States Secret Service, all right? They are putting their lives on the line as much as you put your life on the line when you cross a busy intersection, when you walk across a busy intersection, when you drive to work. You're putting your life on the line. I'm not familiar with many United States Secret Service agents who've lost their lives while doing their duty in the past 70 years. Can you name any in the past 60 years?
Well, you know, when we were in hearing, we actually asked that question to Sheetal, and she said, you know, the Secret Service's job does not stop at the fence line for a rally. So, in my opinion, these excuses that they're making, what I will tell you is, knowing what I know from the investigation, Laura, I know for a fact that Secret Service did not show up at...
It's not an excuse. It is far more difficult to make safe an outdoor rally compared to an indoor rally. Right? It's far more hazardous. Right? To try to make this into a partisan thing is low IQ, right? You appealing to the worst in people.
At the Butler County EU, which is where they were coordinating with the other 40 sniper teams that were present at that previous rally. So this was obviously a lapse in judgment for Secret Service, and I do believe that if they assign the proper details and also they do their jobs, he will continue to be able to do rallies outside. But
so I hate the company this puts me in, but I don't think it is clear right now that this is primarily a lapse in judgment by the United States Secret Service, right? It's not clear yet that this wasn't malicious, right? Jill Biden was afforded far more security than Donald Trump. That was a decision made by the Joe Biden administration, right? The lack of competent United States Secret Service agents last Saturday was a deliberate decision by the Joe Biden administration, all right? It just wasn't per chance, just wasn't haphazard. It just wasn't the breaks. All right. It was a deliberate decision by the Biden administration to afford Joe Biden far more security and to give the dregs of security to watch over Donald Trump's campaign rally. Right. That's a deliberate decision made by the United States Secret Service, operated by a Joe Biden appointee. It wasn't just a chance that this happened.
But again, this was just gross incompetence, and it is by the grace of God that Trump's alive, but we are glad that she stepped down.
Well, thank goodness. But back to you, Tim. I mean, this seems like it's a failure on the part of the Secret Service operationally, right, organizationally. And now this is going to have an effect on the campaign. I mean, it shouldn't you know, harm the political process that the Secret Service has been run by an incompetent who's good friends, by the way, with the Bidens. She's very close with Jill Biden and President Biden, which that's fine, but
life's not fair. All right, it's not bewildering that Secret Service suggests to the Trump campaign that they cool it with the outdoor rallies. Right, constantly, other people's incompetence is going to hold you back. Other people's venality, other people's lies. That's just the nature of reality. And becoming outraged about it usually will not be in your own best interests.
It's something about this I don't like. I don't like this, and maybe it's that...
Yeah, because you're just appealing to the low IQ nature of your audience, telling them what they want to hear.
She couldn't answer a question yesterday, but I don't like this outcome.
Yeah, and you know, Laura, you're spot on.
So much of life you're not going to like. Reality, much of reality you're not going to like. Right, I'm a single man. I walk down the street and none of the hotties tend to be particularly interested in me. I don't like that part of reality. Oh, well.
On because the organization is led by a leader, and we're seeing systematic breakdowns. Thank God she's gone. I wish her the best. But the Secret Service has a big job in front of it because they have to reestablish trust with the American people. People need to know you can go to these rallies and be safe. And I think the confidence has been shaken. The good news is the Secret Service, with the right leadership, they're going to get back to being the Secret Service they were, and that's going to be because they're going to be mission-focused leaders, not worried about personalities or quotas.
Congresswoman, we learned from the New York Times today, I also want to get Tim's quick view on this, that the counter-sniper's view, so our guy's view, was obstructed in part by a tree. Now, you can see it here in the video that they took at the site. Your reaction to that? I mean,
yes, the sniper, Crooks, Thomas Crooks, he had the advantage, right? He dominated the situation. He outsmarted the security, including the Secret Service. He was the master of his situation.
It's another reason probably to have be on that roof, as if you needed another reason. But again, this is kind of Mickey Mouse stuff.
Come on, this roof had a slope, and it was 76 degrees. Do you really expect our law enforcement to be out there on top of a sloped roof in 76-degree temperatures?
That you can kind of see after the fact. But why wasn't this done?
You know,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I do know that there were multiple sniper teams, but you are correct. From that very famous footage, you see the sniper team. It looks like they're hesitating, but they're not. They actually had their view obstructed. It was another team that took the shot. But again, going back to the fact that Butler County Emergency Service, Secret Service should have scouted that. They should have flagged that, and they intentionally did not show up to the briefing where the other snipers were at. So obviously, I feel personally, Laura, that there need to be people fired. She's not the only one that should have resigned, but absolutely. Yeah. And I'd be interested to hear the other gentleman's perspective on this as well.
Tim, would you allow the president to have ever taken that stage, knowing there was a person of interest, of suspicion, and you got the tree? Apparently, the trees are now a focus, and they didn't have a clear view of that roof.
Yeah, Laura, this is a cascading, error-filled event because remember that most of the security is planned before the protectee ever gets there. You, as a site agent, you walk every single foot of that. And the fact that one of the major obstacles, because all you have to do is stand at the podium and look, and you see a perfect sniper's nest. The problem is that they identified it, and we're going to see all this with the SOD reports and all the things coming out. But the reality, they didn't post it. If you notice that it's a big problem, you have to own it, is what we would call it. And that's not by having snipers.
Yeah. Tim, Congresswoman, both of you, thank you so much. So it did take 10 days, but it finally happened.
Yeah, so accountability, all right, I don't think it's evenly distributed between all groups, all right? Some groups take more accountability for their failures than other groups. So maybe we need more of the type of culture that rewards accountability.
Former President Trump will be protected.
Well, I'm very concerned. First of all, I'm glad that the director resigned. She gave some of the most appalling testimony I've seen in my 8 years in Congress. And the people who were on that site need to be fired. I mean, I don't understand how you can have a major assassination attempt on a former president and not have some heads roll. But if the Secret Service...
Okay, so how do you create a culture of accountability? All right? How do you elevate the pursuit of excellence? Interesting discussion here. Evolutionary theories of female gossip.
Share personal details about themselves, or
so men and women, all right, we tend to gossip about different things, and we tend to create different types of relationships.
And it was whether or not they were two people touching cheeks, like with their faces pressed against each other in their profile photo. And there was a huge difference between men and women. Women were much more likely to have a cheek touch photo than men were as their profile picture on Facebook.
Yeah, that's really funny. I bet if you looked at like matching tattoos, you might also find a sex difference where...
All right, this is Diana Fleischman talking with fellow professor Tanya Reynolds. Tanya Reynolds specializes in the study of female gossip.
Women would get the same tattoos as their same-sex friends. In one of my studies with Jamie Palmer-Hogg, we found that women were more upset when their friends did not convey cues of interpersonal devotion. So if they didn't like ask about what was going on in your personal life or share personal details about themselves, or if they were never the one to reach out to you, if you always had to reach out.
All right, so these female preferences, right, they don't lead to excellence in the military or in law enforcement, right? They lead to excellence in other areas of life.
To them first. Women tended to be more bothered by those types of transgressions, suggesting they need more cues of interpersonal devotion in their friendship than men do in their same-sex friends. So maybe cheek touching.
So when you have female-dominated areas of academic study or of corporate life, right, you have more of these requirements that you show interpersonal care and concern.
Is another cue of interpersonal devotion.
Well, it's also, really open signaling. Thinking of tattoos, I imagine that actually a lot of men in groups have similar tattoos, whether they're, I don't know, Freemasons or in Army or Navy or Marines or some battalion. I imagine that's also another very common matching tattoo. And that gets us into what are male and female friendships for and why are they different?
Yeah, so for men, their same-sex friends seem to look, at least their preferences seem to look.
So camaraderie, right, naturally builds up when people spend time together. And the type of camaraderie that develops, right, will be influenced by the cues and the preferences. And male camaraderie, right, develops along different lines than female camaraderie. If you want to have excellence in law enforcement, the military, you need a strongly masculine culture.
Look pretty similar to what you would expect if men were looking for fellow coalition partners, particularly in the domains of like hunting or warfare. So if you think about like which traits would be advantageous in those contexts, being strong, having a high pain tolerance, being courageous, and being loyal to the overall group. And that's what you find is that men tend.
Right. This is what happens with masculine culture. And this is particularly suitable for producing excellence in military and law enforcement cultures.
To prioritize those types of traits in their same-sex peers, suggesting men's modern day friendship preferences might be mimicking who they were looking for as allies in historical ancestral context when they needed to figure out, okay, who's going to be useful on the battlefield next to me, or who can I trust to be useful on the hunt and
right. If you want someone who's going to be useful on the battlefield, right, you need male norms, right? You need a masculine culture. You need men in charge.
Actually help me kill this large bison or whatever it is.
Right. You need men large and in charge if you want excellence in military and in law enforcement.
Whereas women, their friendships, their preferences seem to highlight cues of kindness and cues of interpersonal devotion. You know, are you loyal to me personally? And so what I think women's friendships.
And this is what happens when you have women developing cliques of power and influence. You have to meet these female needs if you want to succeed.
Might be reflecting is that across human groups, you tend to see this pattern that throughout human history, women more often left their family groups to go live with their husbands when they got married. So more social groups were patrilocal than matrilocal, meaning that women were kind of leaving their families and living with their husbands' families when they got married. And so what this meant is women had to actively recruit female friends rather than just like rely on kinship relationships. And so if you're looking for a female friend, you might want to look for who would be a good exchange partner. So who is going to be generous, forgiving, and that would make sense as to why women prioritize cues of kindness. But then also you might care about who's going to be loyal to you.
Right. Prioritizing cues of kindness and personal loyalty are great in certain areas of life, such as with child rearing. But it is not a recipe for producing excellence in law enforcement and the military.
It isn't going to abandon you when there's another potential friend that's offering more profitable exchanges. And so that might be kind of why women attend to cues of interpersonal devotion. I also think that women care about.
I mean, who are the greatest female generals in history? I mean, who are the greatest female police chiefs in history, right? If we were to list off the 100 greatest generals of the 20th century, none of them would be women. If we were to list off the 20 greatest generals working today, none of them would be women. If we were to list off the 50 most effective, most excellent police chiefs, none of them would be women. If you want excellence in these areas, you need to put in a masculine culture with men large and in charge.
Cues of interpersonal loyalty because they had a lot at stake. So women tend to compete with one another using reputational attacks. And so if you have a female friend who is disloyal, she might disclose your deep, dark secrets to everyone in the group, which may sound trivial in a modern context. But if we think about throughout human history, if she was telling everyone in the group that you cheated on your husband and he believes it, that might mean he leaves you, abandons you and your kids, or even kills you. And so I think there was a lot at stake for women's loyalty to one another. You know, one instance of defection could have meant life or death.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. If women are also helping each other with childcare, which I'm not sure that the data are that strong in support of, but if they were, then if a woman wasn't loyal to you, she might also harm your kids. So there's another case where you really need to trust that she has your back.
Oh, I didn't know the data weren't that strong for like allo mother.
Is a form of commitment, like a commitment device. So if I tell you something really personal about myself, I'm basically increasing the risk of defection. That now, you know, I'm signaling my loyalty to you. I'm not going to want to betray you because you have this important dirt on me. So perhaps that might be why we get some form of, I don't know, mood boost by sharing our personal information. But it would be interesting to see if that, first I'd be interested to see if it like differs to
men and women relating to each other in specific, both coalitional and competitive way. Tons of people use these. And I think that that's
that people, it feels really good to disclose about oneself and particularly one's vulnerabilities. At least for women, I think one reason that women enjoy disclosing vulnerabilities, and women don't tend to form these strong hierarchies to the same degree as men. And in fact,
right, hierarchy is necessary for excellence in military and law enforcement. Not so necessary for excellence in other areas of life.
Prestige man, it's not always the same person who is the top of the hierarchy and who everybody sort of doesn't necessarily submit to, but they don't tend to attack. And these hierarchies remain stable, just like there's a pecking order among chickens. But I think part of the reason that I've heard that women are, you know, signaling submission, sharing secrets and gossiping with each other is because who's on top of this hierarchy or who's on top in a group it tends to shift a lot, even when women know each other for a long time.
Yeah.
And constantly shifting hierarchies do not produce excellence in military and law enforcement. But this is what you get when you have women in charge.
I think that women don't tend to form these strong hierarchies to the same degree as men. And in fact, when you look at preferences,
men respond to hierarchy, right? Men, particularly younger men, naturally orient upwards to those above them in social status. Right? Men respond to laws. Right? Men respond to excellence, to male role models, to hierarchical ways of doing things, to discipline.
Show much stronger preferences for equal distributions of resources and power. And I think that the reason that they do this is
right. So the female tendencies are essentially visible in woke culture, right? Woke is disproportionately a female thing, right? Female tendencies unchecked give you woke culture, right? The left, right? Mothering type of politics, nurturing politics, right? These are extensions of female tendencies unchecked by marriage and responsibility and children. If you don't have a man in your life, you're going to much more look to government to provide nurturing and protection for you. So these female tendencies are much more on the left. They are much more egalitarian. They are anti-hierarchy. They are more resistant to men taking the lead and setting the rules.
Because if they're forming dyadic relationships, then one way to promote stability or in the bond to ensure that it's mutually beneficial is if partners have equal distributions of power and resources. So these mathematical models find that.
Right, and this is what happens when you get more and more women in charge, right? They run things along these tendencies, and these tendencies do not produce excellence in the military and law enforcement.
If partners diverge too much, if there's too much asymmetry, then basically it's no longer a mutually beneficial exchange, and it devolves into parasitism or just.
Right, if you go to synagogue and you beg for money, you're not going to make any friends there, right? You've immediately removed yourself from decent company.
It's like a unilateral transfer of resources. And so the character I like to think of is like if a celebrity tried to befriend a homeless person, it's really unlikely that they'd have interest aligned.
Right. The worst thing about being dysfunctional is that only dysfunctional people will hang out with you by and large. The worst thing about being an underowner or a porn addict or a sex addict or a love addict or a debtor or a compulsive shopper or someone who plays a ton of video games is that only other people similarly dysfunctional to you will spend time with you.
And instead, it would probably just devolve into like the celebrity giving the homeless person resources or.
Right. So in synagogues I've gone to, the people who make over $200,000 a year hang out with each other. The people who earn over $1 million a year tend to hang out with each other. You don't have a lot of friendships between people earning $500,000 a year and people earning $50,000 a year.
Or some type of exploitation. And so unlike that case for women, men tended to form larger groups, including for hunting and warfare. And in these larger groups, you tend to need more hierarchy to promote coordination. So you need to have a.
Yes, men form larger groups and they love bringing in people who are excellent because it provides them distinct advantages.
Strong chain of command in order to be coordinated. So if you see like in the military, there's a strong line of command and that promotes cohesion in the group. And this allows for building of larger groups, which is advantageous in warfare. And so you should predict that men should feel more comfortable deferring to other talented same-sex peers, even if it means they're getting the shorter end of the stick. So I like to think of kind of.
Men naturally defer to excellence. Men naturally recognize excellence. Men naturally honor excellence. This produces excellence.
Analogies to sports, that if you have a really talented athlete on your team, the entire team benefits. Just like in warfare, if you have this amazing warrior, you are all more likely to win and survive and reproduce. And so men stood to gain from forming these larger groups and deferring to same-sex peers who had more talent. Whereas if we think about our female ancestors, they were more cooperating on like a dyadic, two-person.
Yeah, so female culture does not naturally create excellence.
And gossip, and they're kind of a lot of wisdom.
And it was interesting because across the anthropological data, when they looked at these non-industrialized groups, it looked like the strongest predictor of allo care was kinship. And so that the
more connected you are genetically, right, the better the odds that someone's going to take good care of you. Right, the more people have in common, the better they tend to get along.
Are more likely to die, and they've even found that pattern across socioeconomic gradients. So it suggests.
Yes, across socioeconomic gradients, the more kinship you have, right, the more you have in common, the more genetically you have in common, the better people treat you.
About a sheik who has, 6 wives.
There is a larger distance in age, and usually the arrangement was that the older, more senior co-wife, she would not torment the younger co-wife if the younger co-wife took care of her.
So we can see what female-dominated spaces look like and operate like, and we can see what male-dominated spaces look like, and where would you not want the masculine excellence that comes from male-dominated spaces?
And so these two strategies, what's interesting about both of them is they portray the gossiper as.
Okay, let me rewind this.
Those transgressions, those perceived transgressions, reputation harming information, and I think that, and the data suggests that people don't recognize these types of statements as much as if you say it, malevolently or even just neutrally. So if you say the same.
So talking about how women gossip, what makes them so effective and so deadly?
And, a woman leaving, I guess, without permission. I guess that happens occasionally. But it did seem like men were beating older co-wives who were being nasty to the younger, especially younger, more beautiful, more expensive co-wives.
Which, if that's the case, and if that occurred throughout human history, that would be a selective pressure for women to guise their aggression in ways that men can't detect, right? Or in ways that would make them be portrayed as innocent rather than as the malevolent perpetrators.
Yeah, I think. Well, that gets us perfectly segued. Very good, Tanya. The next phase of this conversation. So women gossip about each other, but they don't gossip about each other in ways that is always perfectly easy to understand. You've done some.
And skepticism in the chat about evolutionary psychology. Well, you don't necessarily need evolutionary psychology or to accept evolutionary psychology to recognize the wisdom in studies of how men bond and how women bond. What type of communities are created by women? What type of communities are created by men?
Work on gossip. What do women say about each other so that they can conceal their ill intent?
Yeah, so I found two different strategies that seem to characterize women's gossip. One is that they use pro-social concern. So they say things like, oh, I'm just worried about her. She's been spending a lot of money lately and, I just don't want her to lose all of her resources. Or I'm worried she's been sleeping around a lot lately and I don't want her to get hurt. And so it's guised as concern. And I think that, and the data suggests that people don't recognize these types of statements as much as if you say it, malevolently or even just neutrally. So if you say the same thing.
Yeah, so women are very effective, very deadly with how they deploy gossip.
It's possible that women are filling out self-report as being more agreeable, but if you had an objective measure of the
decision making, and women perceive themselves to be more ethical when making decisions, but if you control for social desirability bias, the sex difference goes away.
Right, women do see themselves as, finer, higher, kinder, more ethical than men.
And then there's also data.
And it's a delusion.
I think it's Rudman's data where she found that women say they like female leaders when you ask them explicitly, but when you measure it on an implicit level, they don't like female leaders any more than men do. And then there's also data.
Like an implicit association test or what?
I think that's how they did it.
Okay.
And then there's also data with women's sexuality too, where women will say that they aren't as sexually motivated, but then if you use like a bogus pipeline, you find that they are more sexually motivated than they disclosed. And then there's other work finding that like there's this disconnect between women's self-report of their sexual arousal compared to their bodily arousal. There's just like, they don't correlate that strongly.
So women are less likely to tell the truth about what's really going on for them, what really motivates them, than men.
And so if we take all of these patterns together, gossip, liking female leaders, and sexuality, what I think they have in common is that perhaps women are self-deceived about all the inclinations and motivations that.
Yeah, that certainly matches my experience with women, right? More dramatically self-deceived than men.
About hierarchy.
To men's interests. There's some data that women will dislike and distrust. I think it's Hannah Bradshaw who's done this work. They dislike and distrust women who are guys' girls and kind of tend to have more guy friends and have more masculine interests and don't want to hang out with women as much. And so I think both of these patterns are tapping into like cues of loyalty. Like, are you on team women or are you on team men? And if you are,
I think this is a pretty good breakdown of how the world works.
On team men, you're appealing directly to men's interests. You might be bothersome for two reasons. One, you're going to be kind of a mating threat because you're appealing directly to men, and you might be kind of more likely to screw over another woman to get a guy. And then two, you're also signaling some type of like loyalty to men. So if you're not showing loyalty to women, then that could be problematic. If we think of like throughout human history, say there was concern over maybe one woman had a husband who was incredibly abusive. You would want your female allies to be on team women because they might kind of rally social support for you to protect you or maybe to get, food for your kids or whatever. Whereas if she was on team men, she'd be like, you deserved it. Sorry.
So we've got all these news reports about how most online social media reaction to Kamala is particularly obsessed with race, and that this is a bad thing that Republicans have to watch out. But the whole reason that we have Kamala Harris running for president of the United States as the Democratic nominee is solely because of her race. If she were white, she would not be running for the Democratic nomination for president, just like Barack Obama would never have risen to be president of the United States if he wasn't black. So in a diversity, equity, inclusion culture, where the Democratic Party increasingly wants to side with blacks and wants to increasingly be identified as the black party, then it just makes sense that Republicans will become the de facto white party, the party that prizes excellence, the more that Democrats prize diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't think focusing on Kamala Harris's race and just deriding her as the diversity, equity, inclusion candidate is a winning strategy, right? The winning strategy is to align your presentation with people's interests. But we got a lot of social media reports about this focus on race. House GOP leaders urge members stop making race comments about Harris. And that's difficult to do in the context, all right, that Harris was promoted solely on the basis of her race, not because she has any background in excellence. So where's the excellence that you might want people to instead focus upon? It's difficult to see.
And so I think that women care a lot about cues of women's loyalty to other women, which I think also ties back into that pattern that where in some of my research, we found that like women show this pro-female bias to a stronger degree than men do. So women are more likely to like have opposition to other women's being hurt or harmed.
That certainly matches my life experiences.
This news story was written by Emmanuel Pham of her on X, according to recent data. During her short-lived 2020 presidential campaign, conservatives described Kamala Harris as angry, mean, and aggressive, attacks that her supporters likened to the racist trope about angry black women. One small-town Virginia...
Well, what if it's accurate, right? You can call this or that a racist trope, but what if it's accurate? I mean, much of the way that she did campaign was nasty.
Virginia mayor called Harris Aunt Jemima, referring to the widely condemned and retired name of a more than 100-year-old pancake brand. After 3.5 years as vice president, the racial attacks on Harris, the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India, have continued, but are now tied to the broader culture war over corporate diversity and affirmative action programs. As Democrats coalesce around Harris as their nominee after President Biden announced Sunday that he was ending his re-election bid, America's fraught racial politics are set to, once again, take center stage. This week, while more than 40,000 people joined a Zoom meeting hosted by a political collective called Win with Black Women, which raised $1.5.
So if Joe Biden says he's going to select a black woman to be his vice president, right? Kamala Harris was overwhelmingly chosen because she fit that category. So if you obsess about race, why would people not push back on that score? I sponsor a lot of people in 12-step programs, and many of my sponsees would rather do anything than the actual 12-step work. They want to talk about Christianity. They want to talk about Catholicism or Jesus. And it's just a never-ending struggle. I have to bring them back to the 12-step work that we're supposed to do together, right? You don't get to just check out from the work and make, these long, broad, largely disconnected points about how your Christian faith is helping you overcome this or that addiction. And so if you keep pushing your Christianity where it's not directly relevant, people are going to resent that. If I started pressing my Judaism, right? I've gone to 12-step programs for 13 years, all right? I never bring up, Rabbi so-and-so says this, or the wisdom of the Talmud says that. I just don't bring that up. I leave my Judaism out of my 12-step meetings because I don't want to bring in outside issues, right? It's against the rules. It's against the principles of 12-step. So when you select someone based on race, why would you then expect to skip reaction on that score, right? If you push race or you push religion or you push outside issues onto people, then you're going to get blowback on that score.
$5 million for Harris within 3 hours. Some conservatives took to social media to paint Harris as an unqualified candidate who had only been elevated to this position because of her race and gender. On Monday...
Wait, that's exactly what Joe Biden said. He was going to select a black female vice president. That's the context for these attacks. It's like you beat someone up, and then they finally punch you back. And then the news story is, why did Joe punch back? Well, he got tired of being beaten up with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and having a vice president and potential president selected primarily on the basis of her race and gender. Why would people not react negatively to that?
Representative Tim Burchett, Republican Tennessee, decried on X the potential elevation of our DEI vice president, a reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that...
Okay, so where is her proven record of excellence that one could look to as opposed to her diversity, equity, and inclusion selection? All right, she appears to have slept her way into political life and had things given her. Where would an objective observer point to her excellence that stands out and commands attention? Right? If you don't have excellence that stands out and commands attention, then people are going to look at how you got to where you got. And you got there, Kamala Harris, by sleeping with Willie Brown.
Have come under attack by conservatives who say they lead to minorities getting jobs over more qualified white candidates. In recent weeks, the New York Post has labeled Harris the first DEI president. On Fox...
Well, of course, if you have diversity, equity, inclusion policies, of course, many white candidates are going to be passed over for less qualified candidates. That's the whole basis. That's the whole focus. That is how DEI operates in the real world. Why would there not be resentment against that?
Business Representative Chip Roy, Republican, Texas, said Democrats must choose between a mentally incompetent president and a DEI vice president. And Fox News host Jeanine Pirro said that Harris has proven to America why DEI doesn't work. It's unclear why some conservatives consider Harris unqualified, some of her supporters say. As a black woman, I'm just feeling very wary, said Renee Griffin.
Oh, so it's up to conservatives to justify why they don't see any record of excellence, right? Why is it not on Kamala Harris and her supporters to point out her excellence? Right? You push diversity, equity, and inclusion in people's faces, and they react.
Out of discussing this by people who say it's slut shaming or it's not relevant. It is relevant when a young candidate tries to sleep her way into politics and into power. And that is what it appears Kamala Harris did when she was a young political aspirant in San Francisco, when she had an affair with a man 30 years older than she was. She was 29 to 30 and he was 60, Willie Brown, who was like the godfather of San Francisco politics and very well known. And sure enough, that relationship paid dividends for her in more ways than one.
That's right, Megan. As you noted yesterday, it's completely fair game to talk about Willie Brown. It's how Kamala Harris went from a relatively unknown Alameda County prosecutor to the forefront of San Francisco social life and politics. Willie Brown was the most powerful politician in California when Kamala Harris started dating him. And he also gave her a number of positions. We're talking about $400,000 back in the 1990s. That's almost $800,000 in today's money. He appointed her to those positions that paid her lucratively. He gave her the keys to a BMW, and he went around the most powerful and most wealthy circles of San Francisco and California politics with Kamala Harris on his arm, opening up the doors to her professional and political future.
So it was back when, again, she was 30 years old. He was, at the time, Democratic Speaker of the California State Assembly, quoting here from a Washington Examiner piece, which is very good. The position that he gave her on the California Medical Assistance Commission in 1994 paid at that time over $70,000 a year, which is about $120,000 in current money. And she served on the board until 1998, so about 4 years. That medical commission met twice a month. So for 2 meetings a month, she was getting the equivalent of $120,000. And you know why Democrats in San Francisco were mad about it? It wasn't because she wasn't qualified, which she wasn't. It was because those positions are supposed to be saved for only the most prized Democrats who Willie Brown really owed favors to, who did really, amazing things to keep Willie Brown in power. But instead, he gave one to his lover. He was, by the way, still married, though he was reportedly estranged from his wife for a long time. This was technically an extramarital relationship. And they were mad that he gave one of his choice grifting positions, not to somebody who'd done a lot for Democratic politicians, but to Kamala Harris. And not just that, there was another one. He gave her a second position as well, which was basically the same kind of deal, where he just gave her an appointment. She reeked in tons of money, and boom, Bob's your uncle. She was off to the races in Dem politics. And then Willie Brown is on record as saying, I also then helped her with her next big position, which was becoming San Francisco DA.
Right. When she ran for district attorney, they had broken up. Willie Brown, as soon as he ran and won the San Francisco mayor election, he broke up with Kamala. And then, Kamala was there for the victory party. But by the time the inauguration hit, his estranged wife reappeared to be holding the Bible while he took the oath of office. And Kamala was kind of pushed aside. But Willie Brown didn't forget her. When Kamala decided to run for district attorney of San Francisco, he was there quietly nudging all of his wealthy donors and powerful connections to help her out. Him and Terrence Hallinan, the existing district attorney, were not friends anymore. They had kind of had an ugly clash. And Kamala Harris likewise tried to overthrow Hallinan's second in command, but failed miserably. And so she ended up leaving the office to kind of plot her revenge. So Willie Brown was definitely there behind the scenes, but Kamala Harris did as much as she could before the election to distance herself from Willie Brown. At one point, doing a very long interview with San Francisco magazine, throwing him under the bus entirely, saying, Willie Brown's career is over. He's done. Hello. My turn is here. It's Kamala Harris. Sounds really familiar, Megan, compared to what just happened last weekend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole Democratic Party is going to be stepping all over Joe Biden momentarily. He's going to get his weekend in the sun about what a lion he is. And then as soon as they realize that they can blame everything on him and take it off of Kamala, That's what they're going to do. Every
Wow,
inflation number you've
point.
seen, it's all his fault. She didn't touch it. She was just a lowly vice president. What was she supposed to do? But talk to me a little bit about her background, because she rose in San Francisco and then California, right, as the attorney general, and then became a U.S. senator from California. All she's had to do is compete, for the most part, I know there's some exceptions, against other liberals.
So compete is a key word here. Men tend to like competition and they recognize there are rules for competition. Women tend to hate competition and they don't recognize rules for competing. So women will fight dirty, often in ways that men just can't comprehend.
Right? Like, has she ever had to compete against a bull, like Donald Trump, like the silverback gorilla, like Donald Trump, Republican versus Dem? It's on. I realized that she ran as the vice president, but she wasn't the chief. That was.
So Mark Halperin has a big fear for America if Donald Trump wins. He thinks there's going to be a major mental health crisis for left-wing Americans, that they are just going to go out of their minds if Donald Trump wins the White House. Well, why did Mark have a similar fear for Republicans after Donald Trump lost in 2020? And Mark makes the point that Republicans just get on with their lives, that, yeah, there are eruptions, unsightly eruptions such as January 6th, but overwhelmingly Republicans just get on with their life, because their lives do not primarily revolve around politics. They revolve around family, around work, around community, and around religion. But for many Democrats, their lives revolve around politics, and so he fears a massive mental health crisis on the left if Donald Trump wins re-election.
It was really Joe Biden's fight.
Well, the interesting race is when she ran against Steve Cooley for the attorney general position in 2010. Cooley was a relatively sensible law and order Republican from Los Angeles, and really the last meaningful Republican in California politics. And even it was a big year for Democrats. They won by double digits for California Democrats. But Kamala Harris really struggled against Steve Cooley and barely edged out a victory. It looked like the night of the election that she had lost. And lo and behold, weeks later, they did recounts and recounted all the rest of the votes, and she just barely squeaked off a victory. It was really close. And you can definitely look at that campaign and see that, maybe she will be competitive in this race against Donald Trump as well. But it's hard to see that happening.
Some are now trying to excuse her awkwardness, repeated and everywhere, as she lost her footing as vice president and didn't have the confidence required to really be herself, which I guess is this secret version of charming. Is there anything in her past that would shed light on what's true about her? Has she always been awkward like this, with the weird laughing and the inappropriate jokes and every time the failed attempts at profundity?
Yeah, a lot of it's the product of being a California politician, right? When you're a California Democrat, all you have to do is impress the donors, impress the political power brokers, and kind of show up and demand a seat at the table. Willie Brown taught her how to do that. So she did have some level of that with the top donors, but she never really connected with the California people. But as we've shown earlier, you don't necessarily need to convince voters. You just need to convince the Democratic Party, and everything will fall in line for you pretty well. So
Boy,
what's
that pattern repeated itself.
Yeah, so she's really good at maneuvering within the Democratic Party, right? Not so good making a case to voters, but very good at getting along with Democratic Party elites, right? I think much of the best investigation work made public that we've had so far about the Secret Service incompetence trying to protect Donald Trump is being put out there by Dan Bongino.
However, we are not done with Kim Cheadle. Kim Cheadle, failed Secret Service director, now former, is going to have to answer. Is going to have to answer for what happened, how they nearly got President Trump killed. I will stay on top of who is named the acting director. And if the person is also incompetent, I will tell you first. I'm watching everything right now. I know the players involved. This is going to be your home for breaking news. Now, I haven't let you down yet, have I? I told you last night she wasn't going to survive the week. I wasn't.
Okay, so comments in the chat. I don't understand how bringing any of this up is going to cost Kamala Harris anything. This is just basic U.S. politics. The critiques are correct. It's just beating a dead horse. Yeah, that's correct. This is not a show to get people to vote Republican. So Kerry says, it's legit for the Secret Service to not have another mess outside, but how often do you have to blame Donald Trump for their screw up? He didn't tell them to be more diversity, equity, and inclusion after all. No, I'm just making the point that Donald Trump has played a role in his own misery. Democrats did not launch lawfare at other Republicans on anything like the amount that they did to Donald Trump. this is in large part because Donald Trump provided them the means to go after him, right? He is a significant cause of his own misery.
Making that up. I was getting that from sources saying she was getting ready to bail. She had lost all political cover. The Democrats wanted her out. Raskin wanted her out. And Biden and Harris right now do not want additional headaches. Biden's dealing with this health problem that's now become a public relations disaster. Harris is down 11 points in the recent poll. They do not want the headache of an incompetent director who went up to Capitol Hill yesterday and embarrassed the entire country in front of the world. She was a disgrace, and she will say her name now is now tarnished forever.
So I think Donald Trump would have fired a Secret Service director who performed as Kimberly Cheadle did yesterday.
Will forever be associated with failure for what she did. One quick story before I get to my breaking news. I reported this last week. Again, I was called crazy, and I'm getting really kind of tired of it, folks. I'm just a guy. It gets old. You develop a thick skin.
Okay, so yeah, Dan Bongino has done a lot of excellent work pushing forward this story. Let's get a little bit here from Fox News.
Be fired if you do not resign.
You should resign. I think there are colleagues on both sides of the aisle who believe that.
You have offered no reason for this committee, this body, or the American people to trust you or the Secret Service today. And you should resign.
Cheadle's testimony left everyone more confused and frustrated and suspicious than they were before it started. Even anti-Trump deep staters like McCabe, shocked.
The fact that she didn't have a detailed, releasable timeline is just, it's mind-boggling. That's the bare minimum of what she was going to be expected to address.
Right. The more elite circles you move in, the more you're expected to behave with good faith, right? And if you're going to so blatantly behave in bad faith, there is going to be a massive reaction, right? The more intelligent you are, the more you're expected to be able to understand things from other people's point of view. And so to essentially give the congressional committee the middle finger was not a wise move.
And she didn't do it. I think she also suffered probably from some.
So I've noticed when I deal with more intelligent people, one of the most frequent things they'll say to me when I try to get away with, shoddy, selfish, self-centered behavior is, "You're smarter than that." And they're right. I was smarter than that, but I just chose to be selfish and hope that I could get away with it. But more intelligent people will very likely call you on your obtuseness.
Some poor advice, which is common in the law enforcement community, and that is this idea that anytime there is an investigation pending, you can refuse to provide information. That's not actually true.
Secret Service won't give us any answers, so Congress had to go to Butler themselves. Congressman Eli Crane was part of that delegation that visited the rally site and got on that dangerously sloped roof.
It's not that steep at all. We just had a 70-year-old man back here climb up on the roof easily. Behind me, you see the windows that Secret Service was supposedly in the second floor of this building.
And an FBI agent, all right, he used water to wash off the roof after the shooting Saturday night, destroying evidence.
Behind makes you wonder why they weren't able to quickly dispatch individual.
He also recorded the view from one of the windows Secret Service had access to, overlooking that entire roof. Crane says they had complete coverage over the grounds and a clear line of sight to where Crooks took his shot. So if there were police posted at that second-story window, how'd they miss Crooks climbing onto the roof? Did they leave? Or were they never there at all?
They left. They went chasing Crooks.
We finally got some answers at a Homeland Security Committee hearing this afternoon. Watch this.
Are you aware whether any law enforcement officer or officers was or were posted in the second floor window of the AGR building?
I am aware, yes, sir.
And what is the answer?
To my knowledge, there were 2 posted there from Butler ESU.
Did they remain on post?
I was told that at a certain point they began searching along with other local officers in the immediacy.
So I have some part-time background in security, about 10 years worth of part-time work in security, and you don't leave your post, right? If you're posted somewhere for a reason, you don't leave it to go freelance.
After Crooks had been identified as suspicious.
Based on what we've learned today, sounds like almost everyone didn't do their job.
Ultimately, Secret Service is the one who made the determination of placement or contacting or making sure the plan was in coordination with the property owner for gaining admittance from the property owner for the second-story window. Is that correct? That was Secret Service's plan.
Correct. Ultimately, it's on the
It's on Secret Service for that plan.
Your officers were assigned to various roles, but they were not.
And the director, Kim Cheadle, she said that building was not Secret Service responsibility, right? They had oversight of it. It was stunning, the lack of accountability. But this is one reflection of the differences between a female culture and a masculine culture, right? Masculine culture dedicated to excellence will reinforce accountability. A more feminine diversity, equity, inclusion culture will not be nearly as excellent nor nearly as accountable.
Not responsible for securing the building or property at AGRs.
So tell me, diversity, equity, inclusion cultures that produce tremendous amounts of excellence and accountability. I am unaware of them.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Is it unusual to have such a small perimeter around an outdoor event like this one?
I would say that we routinely, as a matter of course, exercise deference to the Secret Service to set the perimeter for an event like this.
Meanwhile, the investigation into Crooks continues. Pennsylvania officials visited his family home on Sunday for over an hour, and we're learning more about his prep before the rally. Crooks and his dad were members of the Clarendon Sportsman's Club, an expansive shooting range which, according to reports, also serves as a training facility for local and federal law enforcement agencies, including DHS. Yeah, Crooks may have been training to kill the president right under law enforcement's nose. And now the Secret Service is reportedly encouraging Trump to stop holding outdoor rallies. The feds who failed to keep the former president safe are now leveraging their power to stop him from campaigning in the heartland. Congressman and former Navy SEAL sniper Eli Crane joins me now. Eli, what happened up on that roof when you were walking up there? What'd you see?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jesse. The first thing I noticed as soon as I got out of the SUV in the parking lot was the towering water tower that had, the largest, most unobstructed view over the entire property. That was the thing that I said immediately. If I was a counter sniper, I would want to be up there. As we walked the grounds and went over to the buildings and got up on the roof where the shooter was, Jesse, I looked up and there was that water tower 160 yards away, which makes me wonder who actually placed the counter snipers in position, because not only would that individual have not been able to shimmy up that roof, low crawl to the apex and then take 7 or 8 shots at the former president, he wouldn't have even been able to, get on the ladder had somebody been up on that water tower. So that was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed, that the Secret Service director completely lied to the American people when she said that roof was so sloped that nobody could get on top of it. Myself and several members of the Homeland Security Committee got on top of it, and a 70-year-old member from Florida, Mr. Jimenez, got on top of it, walked right up it, no problem. So that was a complete attempt to gaslight the American people. And the last thing I noticed, Jesse, was that the 2-story building right behind that roof had clear coverage out the windows of that entire roof, and it makes you wonder where the hell those guys went and why they didn't send a rover to go track down or look for this shooter and leave those shooters or that team looking out those windows. So it was just a complete failure of the security forces there at the site.
They abandoned their posts at the window, and then I want to know the name of the person that deploy the counter snipers to the water tower, and I want to know who is making these decisions about where to put these guys. We should know that person's name by now. That's key. Eli, thank you so much. Great job. You shouldn't have to do that. The Secret Service.
All right, let's get back to Dan Bongino here.
But it doesn't mean it can't be, penetrated. It really gets old. I told you last week, Josh Hawley reported yesterday, I love you, Senator Hawley, but this isn't new. We reported this last week on Monday. You can go listen to it. Whistleblowers tell me law enforcement personnel were in fact stationed to the roof on the day of the Trump rally, but abandoned it, citing the heat. They also say law enforcement were supposed to be patrolling the building, but opted to stay inside instead. That's on last week's show, folks. Again, it's not about, please, as my friend, it's not about credit. President Trump almost died. Who gives a shit about the credit? Lead these horses to water anymore. Liberal media people, get your pens out. I've got some more details for you. Ready at home? Number one, we just confirmed. I have it now quadruple confirmed. There was undoubtedly supposed to be a local team posted, a local team. When I say local, I just want to be clear again. I'm talking about not Secret Service. That could be Pennsylvania State Police, Butler County, Pennsylvania Police, local sheriffs. I'm not getting into which locals. It doesn't matter at this point. Someone was supposed to be on that roof as part of the advance plan. It has not absolved the Secret Service of any responsibility whatsoever. They are supposed to check and make sure this stuff happened, period. Someone was supposed to be on that roof. Hawley's tweet is accurate. We reported it a week ago. It was deemed too hot, and the post was abandoned, which allowed a sniper to access that post and shoot the former president. That's not really breaking. It's only breaking that Hawley confirmed what we reported last week. Here, number two. I said this again last week, but now I have it again, double confirmed. The sniper team, the Secret Service sniper team that took out the assassin, the reason there was a delay and they didn't shoot right away is because they were confused as to who that was on the roof, because it was supposed to be a local sniper team. From a very, very, very intimate, close source to the situation, they did not act until they saw the muzzle flash out of the gun, and then they knew it wasn't locals. Totally, completely inexcusable. A communication posting breakdown of apocalyptic fashion. I don't even know what to say, how grotesque this security failure was, that there was confusion about who a guy on a roof in a 130-yard away posted elevated position, ranging in on Donald Trump, sighting in on him, that there was confusion about who that person was, is just such an abomination of a failure. That they had to wait for the muzzle flash before they were sure is just, again, such an apocalyptic failure. I can't believe, as a former member of the entity, the Secret Service, I'm reporting this to you. They waited for the muzzle flash? Another piece of news, so we can finally get the media people. You want the story or not? Here it is. I know you're going to report it a week.
Right. They shouldn't have had to wait for the muzzle flash. Right. If it had been law enforcement, they would have been in uniform. Right. There would have been a color of the day that made them easily identifiable.
Later and say exclusive. Just please listen to me for once, you dumbasses. The team that shot.
So Dan Bongino, not exactly winning friends and influencing people. He is intense and charismatic, but not exactly disinterested.
Assassin. That's not them. We have to get the timeline right. It was the other team that shot from about 400 yards away. That's not the team. It's important because a lot of people are online are like, look, they hesitated. They may have hesitated, but that's not the team. That's not the team. That team probably.
Right. So the Secret Service has a $3 billion budget, but you can dominate them, right? If you get the drop on them. So we all can rise to the occasion in certain situations, right? The situation is the boss. And the shooting is another example of how the situation is the boss.
Probably had a better shot. That's not the team that took out the assassin. I can't emphasize this enough. You got media people still with the freaking timeline wrong. Finally, here's a piece of information I promise you haven't heard yet. You got your pens out, media folks? Apparently, one of the first rounds the assassin shot that penetrated the hydraulic line of that piece of farm equipment, that tractor or whatever it was, that front loader. You can see it on the video. You're going to see the hydraulic line explode and the lever on the front goes up. I'm sorry, folks, I'm not a farmer. I'm not going to pretend to be. It's a tractor, front loader, whatever it is. Doesn't matter for the purpose of this story. Apparently, what happened after that is hydraulic fluid from that specific vehicle, given that the line was penetrated, covered a couple of vehicles in the motorcade, causing a little bit of initial chaos. Second, I'm getting this from a source. I'm going to try to double confirm this, but there was some kind of small explosion after that. Now, to be clear, there's some confusion about what it was.
All right. My favorite channel overall for this assassination story is Law and Crime Network.
It's indicative of a desire to do a grand, sweeping, almost romantic in their mind.
Right. The more pathetic your life, right, the more desperate you are for a grand sweeping gesture, right? The more passive you are in your life, the more you are inspired and turned on by some dramatic gesture, right? The more you fail at day-to-day reality, the more you want to transcend reality.
Gesture to get attention and to fight back rail against a system that they feel has aggrieved them in some way.
But just 1 week since the shooting, investigators are still scratching their heads when it comes to a motive.
I think anything's possible. I wouldn't rule out anything. Somebody will know something. Something will be written somewhere. It has to be. They can't keep it to themselves. It's too big.
As the FBI digs into the gunman's background, we're learning...
Okay, so I suspect the motive is going to be to feel important, to have a feeling of significance, to attach yourself to the person who's likely to be the most powerful man in the world once again.
Conflicting things about his political leaning.
Could be a variety of things. It could just be a confused young man who is still figuring himself out, what he stands for.
Was former President Trump his ultimate target?
For him specifically to go after President Trump, it could be that he has no specific issue with President Trump himself. It could be that he is the higher profile of the two at the moment, seemingly ahead in the polls, and he wanted to influence history. He maybe wanted to derail.
Yeah, I don't think that this was driven by particular animus against Donald Trump. He was looking for the highest profile target that he could get a shot at.
A potential re-election of President Trump.
But experts say the shooter had pictures of Trump and Biden on his phone, but also other politicians too.
These individuals, some of them he may idolize, and some he may demonize in his mind.
Then there's the gunman's troubled history of solitude.
It's not uncommon for people to not ever utter a threat, yet pose a significant one.
To understand more about the shooter's background and to determine how close we are to learning a motive, I sat down with retired NYPD Sergeant Dan Murphy.
It is entirely possible this wasn't done to impress a girl. It was entirely possible this was done to hurt his parents. There's a variety of reasons, and we will find that out soon enough, I think. There's going to be...
Okay, putting my money on a desire for significance, right? After the desire to survive, the next strongest desire is for significance, to raise your status.
Some evidence and some motive uncovered at some point. Whether that's released to us immediately or down the road remains to be seen.
Officials say the man responsible for the shooting is 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, south of Pittsburgh. He drove the some 50 miles to Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th for former President Trump's final rally before the Republican National Convention. Just minutes after Trump took the stage, gunshots erupted.
More than they've said to date. I think that's probably a pretty fair assumption. An individual like this, they're going to look at everything he has written. And nowadays people write on their blogs, they write on their social media. Individuals like this can't help but let somebody know when they're planning something like this.
Unbelievably, the FBI couldn't figure out Stephen Paddock's motivation, the guy who shot up that country music festival in Las Vegas.
In a preliminary investigation, officials found explosive devices in the gunman's car and home. After the shooting, he was found with a remote.
He wanted to make a big bang. I remember when I was 6 years of age, there were 2 occasions when I tried lighting fires, right? I wanted to feel something. I wanted to make the world outside of me match the confused mess that I felt inside of me. I wanted excitement.
Transmitter in his pocket that could have been intended for those explosives. As investigators are looking through physical evidence, they're also searching his digital files. Shortly after the shooting, his cell phone was sent to Quantico, Virginia, to be examined by FBI techs. What we do know about the investigation so far is that they went through his cell phone, through his home, his bedroom, kind of looking through things. What else would investigators be kind of zeroing in on during their investigation?
You need to talk to everybody that knows him. You want to talk to his friends, find his contacts in the phone, get statements from people. You're going to want to get the phone company to get you a history of all his text messaging. They're going to look at his search history to see whether or not he has looked up things, and he probably has. People like this, generally younger people especially, they will look up to people who've done things like this in the past. They'll idolize a Lee Harvey Oswald, or they'll idolize someone else who made themselves famous through an infamous act. Looking up that search history, looking up a variety of things with regards to the rifle, the weapons use. Apparently he bought ammunition that day. He may have done a little bit of history on the Secret Service and looked at video of.
So anything that we can do to reduce the number of incels is probably going to reduce the number of these type of incidents. Not that incels pose a particular violent risk, but when you see people doing horrendous things, usually they are disconnected from others. So his parents are isolated. He's isolated. He doesn't have close friends, right? People who don't have those kind of attachments, right? They're not going to be weighed down by any responsibilities, right? When I am, I don't know, waking up at 3 a.m. and eager to get going with my day, I'm eager to get going on various projects to write an essay or to develop notes for doing a live stream. because it's something that I'm going to want to talk about with people who matter to me, right? When I'm reading a book, when I'm going for a run and listening to a podcast, right? What gives the impetus for the reading and for the work and for digesting and trying to clarify things is so that I can share it with people who matter to me. If I didn't have people who mattered to me, I wouldn't have 25% of the strength that I have.
Of past rallies, etc. He probably did a bit of homework.
Initially, there were reports that the gunman posted to social media writing, quote, July 13th, the day of the shooting, will be my premiere. The FBI later said they believe that account doesn't belong to the gunman, but the confirmed information they found about the gunman so far is conflicting. First, there's his political history. He registered as a Republican, and his former classmates say he always leaned right. But investigators say he donated $15 to a committee supporting Democrats in 2021. There's some unique and conflicting information because we know that he was registered as a Republican, but then he donated to a Democratic organization. So
He has fixated on Donald Trump, and he has decided that he is the enemy. He's evil. And you don't have to look hard in our current media to find people saying just that. People who perhaps should be more responsible with their speech can influence young people, or anyone for that matter.
But this political disparity continues with info from the gunman's phone. We also know that there were some images found on his phone. So we have obviously pictures of Trump, Biden, but then there's a couple more people.
Right. Your father is going to have a profound influence on how you pursue your work, right? How you pursue your career, how you pursue your place in the community, while the mother will usually have a profound effect on how you relate to other people and build friendships and relationships.
That were kind of interesting to me. Rudy Giuliani, Fani Willis, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and then House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And again,
now, these individuals, some of them he may idolize and some he may demonize in his mind. So it's hard to say unless there are comments written under each picture or they're in a separate category. Let's say I have a file of people I hate, people I love. It's not uncommon for people like this to collect things, pieces of information and data that they learn about people and decide.
Yeah, streamers who need people are the luckiest people in the world. Right? I don't understand the motivations of those who are primarily alone as they go through life. Because when I'm standing on top of a cliff looking out at the ocean, I'm thinking about, I want to talk about this with someone. When I'm reading a book, I want to talk about this with someone. When I'm mastering a new exercise or I've overcome some technical issue, I want to share it with someone. If I didn't have someone to share these things with, life would be drained of meaning.
Opinion on them right there based upon that. So I find it interesting. He seems to be all over the board. You're right. But there's more to it. We will learn more, or at least the investigators probably at this
He's not all over the board. He's looking for significance. He's looking to feel important.
point already know a lot more than they've said.
And what's interesting too is that, at least according to the reports we've seen released by the FBI, that there's no threatening language here, that we have these photos, but there's no like political threats or assassination.
He seems to be high IQ. We're probably dealing with someone who's 130 IQ or above. He posed a formidable threat precisely because he was so smart.
Mentions anything like that. So it's
you don't think that he wanted his motives to be topic of national conversation? He wanted to be analyzed?
Kind of interesting that we're seeing these people's names and photos, but no real plan that was written out.
Right. I have done a lot of work in my corporate work in the world of threat assessment. And one of the things that is common is understanding the nature of threats is very difficult for people because sometimes people who pose the most significant threat never utter a threat or issue a threat, and vice versa. So in this case, it's not surprising to me that he would not have written any sort of a threat or even verbally communicated. What he may do is just get people excited. He's excited about what he's going to do and let people know he's excited about something without specifying what it is. It is not uncommon for people to not ever utter a threat, yet pose a significant one.
While there may not have been an outward mention of the attack on President Trump, it's possible the gunman had made threatening statements in the past. Former classmates of the gunman have since said publicly he was an outcast who was bullied every day. Others say people used to describe him as the one who would shoot up the school. There may have been a history with threats, and this is just related to his high school. So some reports say that he apparently threatened to shoot up his high school about 5 years ago, so much so that some kids even stayed home from school that they were nervous. Nothing came of it. He wasn't suspended, anything like that. But is that an obvious red flag?
Yes, anything like that is an obvious red flag. Threatening to shoot up your school is something where he probably, there are legions of people around the world who idolize the Columbine high school shooters from 1999, still to this day. And they look at them as trailblazers in the world of making a statement. To some of these people, living in infamy is better than living in obscurity. and they will idolize these moments of control over systems that they feel have controlled them for too long.
Right. There seems to be a common physiognomy for people who who do these school shootings. All right. Let's say good day to Elliott Blatt. Elliott.
Oh, g'day, bro. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Quick call today. So now I've sort of lost touch with the Trump assassination conspiracy discussion, so to speak. And you have basically conditioned me out of even considering a conspiracy, right?
Yes.
And and now, so just for my own information, would you mind disclosing on a scale of 1 to 10, right? For 0 being there being no conspiracy, and 10 being there's definitely conspiracy, where are you vis-a-vis the conspiracy hypothesis?
I guess emotionally, I'm a 5. Rationally, cognitively, I got to be a 2.
Okay, because in the past, I've been a bit more conspiracy minded than you have been.
Yes,
and not to bring up old painful memories, but our whole COVID discussions and so forth. Not that we need to re-enter those, but but on this one, I'm really strongly on the side of incompetence rather than conspiracy, and only because I don't understand operationally how it would work that this Secret Service detail would have been told to and then therefore implemented a plan to allow an assassin to be successful. Like, how would that work in practical terms? I just can't get my mind around it.
Yeah, so how I was thinking, I never thought that there was like active cooperation between the Biden administration and Thomas Crooks. No one would hire Thomas Crooks to carry out an assassination. What I thought was that it looked like maliciousness on the part of the Biden administration to simply not provide Donald Trump with adequate or competent security. So just as Donald Trump did not provide Joe Biden with adequate security, the security that he was entitled to after he won the election, it would not have surprised me if the Biden administration had turned around and chosen to deploy its most competent assets elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean,
so I never thought that someone on top was issuing orders to don't do your job, right? I don't think that there would be any obvious tells. It was more just using the most competent assets elsewhere and just allowing Trump security to be the dregs of the available options, opening up space for things like this.
Okay, I realize for all of the incompetence that we've identified with the Secret Service, we're talking about a time window of 8 seconds, are we not?
Well, it depends on how you frame it. So was there 8 or 16 seconds between the first shot on Donald Trump and when the guy eventually gets killed? Yeah, something in the neighborhood of 8 to 20 seconds. But the window, depending on how you frame it, it could be 3 hours. 3 hours was when the first law enforcement report was that we had a highly suspicious character walking around with a rangeometer.
Yeah. No, I exactly. Now, by the way, I'm taking no position, because I've been in sort of situations where it was a sort of semi-emergency situation, and I'm sort of aware of the mind state that goes on when you're in a semi-emergency and like how clouded and murky your thinking becomes in such a thing. Because if you don't know exactly what to do, your instinct is to freeze,
Yeah. Yes.
And so I have a lot
particularly
of
the less competent you are, right? The more competent you are so trained, you got so much muscle memory, you're less likely to freeze. But if this is new, and apparently this was an event staffed by a lot of Department of Homeland Security people who weren't really competent in the area of protection, instead of Secret Service agents who are trained. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you're right. And put it this way, I'm way on the side of incompetence or poor training or, just snafu, whatever. I think people aren't machines, right? And so I think the general public or somebody observing from the outside just assumes that people are machines, they're perfectly trained, and whatever happens, they immediately lurch to the right conclusion and take the correct action. And they're not. People have good days and they have bad days. Teams, like who on the ground was capable, I know nothing about any of this, but eventually, like, are the snipers empowered to take this action on their own?
Yes,
initiative?
I believe they are. Yes, they can take out anyone they see as a threat.
Yeah, I just can't fault them for having doubts or waiting for a little bit more confirmation. It's just hard for me to, as much as I'd like to, believe me, I'm sympathetic to those
Right-wing outrage. Yeah, you're on the right.
Yeah.
You're sympathetic to right-wing outrage. This is the Biden administration is responsible for Donald Trump's security.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can understand being in the position. Not that I can really understand being in the position of being a sniper, but I can understand a little bit of hesitation just to double check before taking like the very, moral consequential action of taking a human life. You want to be ultra sure. That would at least be, if I were, by some bizarre twist of fate, in that sniper's shoes, it would be so hard for me to like make the correct decision. And I could totally understand and empathize with freezing at that point. Now,
yes.
Now, I'm just trying to be balanced. I'm trying to be objective.
I appreciate it, because this is the one time where I'm more on the conspiratorial angle, meaning a degree of recklessness and carelessness on the part of those who provided security at a certain point becomes malicious.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, Derek Chauvin, George Floyd, there is so much precedent to err on the side of inaction rather than action. And I can totally understand why people would be just a little bit more deliberative than they should have been. And I just feel for everybody involved, ultimately it worked out for the best, quote unquote. But it's so hard for me to grapple with a situation where people are in circumstances that I just try to put myself in the shoes of the people responsible for acting. And I'm thinking, I could easily been that guy that just dawdled. I could easily have been that guy. I'm just being honest with myself.
No, we've all been that guy. Like, not many people embody excellence, and to the extent that we have consistently embodied excellence, it's been within a particular domain, a narrow domain, certain situation where we tend to be excellent.
Yeah, so this is why this story's been so hard for me to grapple with, and I've just elected not to, and I've gone on to more, easy and more risible and more entertaining stories such as Kamala, But I'm impressed with your ability to persist with this story.
I'm obsessed with this story. Just the intellectual challenge of it, and I do not like my company on the side of the conspiratorial angle. I do not like the people that I'm aligned with.
Yeah, it's amusing to watch this.
Yes,
cognitive dissonance you're wrestling with. All right, so let's move from this topic. I have another topic to discuss. Okay, so have you noticed or observed this particular fetish to criticize and condemn people who mispronounce Kamala's name? Have you noticed?
Yes. Yes, and I think I side with Mark Halperin. I think it is discourteous to deliberately mispronounce her name.
Okay, well, we differ here because I don't necessarily think it's intentional, and I don't think it's necessarily malicious, and I think it's utterly bizarre that the entire media is sort of unified on this particular minutia about mispronouncing a name that is just really not native to the Anglosphere. So I can really forgive people who look at that name and not really know how to pronounce it perfectly.
Right, but it's not malicious if you don't know how to pronounce it or if your lips don't move that way. Those who say it's malicious are only referring to those who deliberately mispronounce her name. They're not referring to those who don't know better or they can't get their lips to form the proper sound.
But even if it's close, to me, it's acceptable. Like these names, like Barack and Obama, these are not Anglosphere names, And Kamala, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly right now or not.
Kamala. It's like Kamala.
Did I do it right or not?
Not really. It's Kamala.
Okay.
Comma.
So
comma.
I was not
Kamala.
intentionally being malicious. I was not intentionally being malicious, but I could easily have been characterized as being malicious because I'm just looking at letters on a page and I'm just trying to sound them out and do my best, right? And so the reason I bring this up is because I was watching one of Mark Halperin's streams.
Yes.
And one of the callers in to Mark's show apparently had mispronounced Kamala's name. And then Mark was like utterly quick to like castigate him for mispronouncing the name. And to me, that I don't, as much as I like Halperin and all forth, he's not a neutral arbiter whatsoever, as much as he pretends to be. He is definitely all in on the anti-Trump side. Whether you like that or not, there's no mistaking that in my view. What do you think?
I don't think that's fair. Of course, he's not perfectly centrist. Yeah, I think he probably leans a little bit more to the left, but I don't know anyone who does a better job doing what he does. Like and what speaks well for him is that he gets experts from across the political spectrum who respect him, and he has created a civil space for sophisticated conversation about American politics.
Fair enough. And I respect, that what he's intending to do. But if you really watch those streams and listen to those streams, you're going to hear 4 out of 5 people. It's basically a Democratic Party strategy session.
Yeah. Most of the people on the streams are Democrats.
Yeah. And he's clearly one of them, And occasionally, so I guess it's just this air of pseudo neutrality that bothers me about that stream. As much as I like him, I'm sure he's very personal and so forth, but it really bothers me that I really feel like I'm in some sort of DNC strategy session and not a true.
Well, some days you are. Most of the people are DNC, and they are. I mean, Democrats have dominated the news the last 3 weeks. So I think you only started listening to Halperin in the last 3 weeks, and so the focus has been on the Democrats. Most of the commentators have been Democrats. What will the Democrats do is the overwhelming focus. And I think he's been quite fair. He says this has been a massive cover-up by the news media and by Joe Biden's aides to cover up for his infirmity, going back to 2018, right? It's Mark Halperin who says he saw clear signs of Joe Biden's cognitive decline back to 2018. And he's been very caustic about Kamala Harris, about how she doesn't think well under the pressure, how she's a poor politician, that she is a terrible manager. So I give him far more props than you do, even though I recognize the primary focus has been the Democrats, and most of the commentators are Democrats.
Okay, fair enough. I still enjoy listening to the stream, but I don't go into it now thinking that I'm sort of like a neutral I'm not on a neutral platform. I feel like maybe it's just that so many of his listeners are in fact Democrats, you know, and it's nothing to do with him. It's just the nature of his audience. But
for civilized,
it's very funny when I listen
sophisticated
to
conversations
his
of
stream,
some length.
his
We'll go for about an hour, I think.
calls,
Bipartisan and not
They seem to-
angry or divided.
Sorry, go ahead. I lost the last 20 seconds. Technical malfunction on my end. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know what you missed, but I'll just say
The last 20 seconds. So
okay, so I've been listening in on his streams, and my perception is that A, it's sort of a Democratic strategy session, but B, they've kind of the depth to which the Democratic side has drunk the DEI Kool-Aid is still astounding to me, because they seem to think that the world and all of us and the rest of America are just crying out for this sort of peak DEI ticket, you know, and that's what we're all aching for, and that we're just sort of suffering under this, you know, totalitarian white supremacy. This is sort of the context with which most of the comments made to Mark seem to be coming from. And it's so alien from me because I just see the world so oppositely than that, if that's a word.
yeah, you're not woke. You have a different hero system, and so that's why you see things the way you do.
Yeah. So I'm so dying for you to just be on one of those calls and like you just drop some like hero system, red pills on those guys. See how they go down. Anyway, just some thoughts. You interested in Mark Halperin, so I associate him with you, and therefore I feel like I could complain about him to you. All right, so here's another topic.
Yeah.
Okay. So 3 or 4 months ago, I paid my taxes and I was just looking at all my expenses. Now you sort of get really financially obsessed when you pay your taxes because you're finally forced to confront the reality of your spending.
Yes.
And so I was looking at it, and I was looking at my Wi-Fi bill, my cell phone bill. And my cell phone bill was like $120 a month.
Yeah, that's what I pay. I don't think you seriously can do better than that.
Well, you can, bro. You can. But there's a cost. So I looked around. I'm thinking, does everybody pay $120 for a cell phone bill?
Pretty much.
And then I got this note. I got one of these ads, and serendipitously, I got one of these ads coming through on my email about this service, and they would give you a cell phone. It was a very complicated set of plans, but at the end of the day, it was like 1/3 the cost. So like for $40 a month, you could effectively get the same thing as that you would get for $120 a month. And so $80 times 12, right, is basically $1,000 a year. Right?
Yeah.
If you could save $80 a month, you would effectively be making $1,000 just from spending less. And as my mother said,
penny saved is a penny earned.
But the government can't tax what you don't spend. They can't tax your savings. You know what I'm saying,
Okay,
bro?
so you're going to switch to cricket?
So I switched. Not only am I going to, I did switch. Switch, Luke. Right? And so I went from like $1,200 a year for cell phone to $400 a year. And I paid it in one lump sum.
Okay.
So it's basically worked. But today I went, it's the summer. I went to the beach and, 40 comes on, starts streaming, and I don't have connection. I don't have Everything else is fine. But when I go to the beach and I listen to 40, I can't hear 40. And so I'm sitting there broiling and just ruminating and cursing myself for being, penny wise and pound foolish for cheaping out effectively on my cell phone plan.
Did you do an internet search for reviews on this product?
Sort of ish, maybe. I don't exactly recall. But the beach that I go to happens to be a weird little dead spot. And it'll show up for 5 minutes and then there's 10 minutes of downtime. 5 minutes, then 10 minutes of downtime. Do you know how infuriating that is?
Oh, it drives me crazy.
Yeah. And so, this particular fact had caused me to just ruminate on all the times that I'd been penny wise and pound foolish.
Yes.
It's I have a cell phone. I want to stretch out. I want to get some sun. I want to relax. I want to listen to 40. I want to listen to streams, and I don't want to deal with dead spots,
Yeah. Absolutely. There are a lot of things that you don't want to take, this out. If that worked, more people would have the cheaper plan, but people by and large spend $120 a month for good reason.
Yeah, and now I'm seeing it. So basically, I've saved $80 a month, but I can't use the internet at the beach, and that wasn't in the fine print, bro. All right, so that was my third topic. Final topic. So Curious Gazelle,
Yes.
Curious Gazelle.
Yes, I do.
So she called into your stream a number of times.
Yes.
And you two had an extended conversation, right?
Yep.
And then she's kind of drifted off she's kind of drifted out and hasn't called in recently.
Correct.
And so last night, I'm looking at my phone and there's this, it's Twitter Spaces, which
Yes.
I'm gradually becoming more an aficionado of. Curious Gazelle has been streaming. And so I tuned in with no intention of calling in. I just tuned in because it was what was on the radio,
Yeah.
And she has a number of characters. She has a very peculiar delivery and demeanor that's actually kind of hypnotic and kind of interesting, which I've come to enjoy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm listening 1 hour, 2 hours. And then immediately, then she sees on the stream that I'm listening. And then she just calls me out, and invites me to join.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is embarrassing. I wasn't really in the mood to join a live stream right now. But at the same time, someone's called me out. I feel duty bound to call in. So I called in. I went on speaker, I unmuted my mic and I called in. And so we end up chatting. We end up chatting for 2 hours.
Wow.
Right? Which is bizarre, I'm fading out. I'm fading out into sleep here. I'm just trying to listen to a stream before I go to bed, And then before you know it, I'm in this long conversation with Curious Gazelle, and then we start talking about you, your stream. And so where you became the topic of the conversation. And then we're talking back and forth, and why does Luke do what he does, and so forth. And I offer my opinion, she offers hers, so on and so forth. And so there had been basically 6 people listening, right? When this whole conversation started. But by the end of it, it was just myself and her. And we're going on and on and on and just opining, endlessly. And I'm like, oh, this is bizarre. So it's just very weird to have a private conversation that's effective, that's public, or a public conversation that's private, because there's only 2 people.
Yeah. Did she leave it up or did she delete it?
It's probably still up, I suppose, but you might.
I'm scrolling. Not seeing it.
It's just a weird sort of artifact of today's streaming culture that I can have a public conversation, a 2-way public conversation. And it's just, I was trying to sort of But anyway, I've encouraged her to participate more because I do think she's an interesting voice because she has some very, what's the word? Iconoclastic positions. She has some just a strange and very mercurial approach to events.
Yes.
And it's a very fun conversation. So anyway, I just felt like I needed to tell you that.
Okay, cool. Good to hear from you, man.
All right, that's all I got, bro.
Okay, take care, bro.
All right,
Cheers.
All right, bye.
Sophisticated conversations of some length will go for about an hour, I think. Bipartisan and not angry or divisive of two-way, but here, those who speak as part of live, there's a lot going on. So welcome. I had time to think a little bit today about where I think the race stands between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you my theory of the case of where we are now, but we all need to bring humility to all this, right? Because we, in some ways, as extraordinary as the debate performance was, and then Joe Biden's decision to give up the nomination, extraordinary as an assassination attempt that almost succeeded against Donald Trump, what's happening now may be, in the context of surprise, more extraordinary, or at least as extraordinary, because most Democrats, including President Biden, did not anticipate Kamala Harris being a strong general election candidate. Severe doubts about her. And that's partly why he was so insistent on trying to keep the nomination even before the debate when people raised it. He saw no way around her being the nominee. I'm going to tell you how I see what's going on with her right now as a snapshot of where we are, and then I'm going to caveat it a lot. But let me tell you what I see currently. And what I see is a race now where we're on the precipice of Donald Trump being the underdog after having a virtual lock on winning a general election. First of all, if you watched the vice president's event today in Wisconsin, you saw a performance that I don't think a critic could take issue with. Now, you could take issue with their emphasis on certain issues, and we'll talk about that. But in terms of performance, on the prompter, relaxed, riding the wave of the audience, it was, I just think, again, I thought the Republican convention was indisputably technically proficient. I thought the rally was technically proficient. I thought her energy was great, her style, her tone. If she pulls that off in her convention speech, it'll be a great success. Second, the press coverage is out of control. We all know, whether you sit in the RNC or in Mar-a-Lago or in Chuck Schumer's communications director's office, we all know what liberal media bias looks like, what anti-Trump resistance press coverage looks like. We all know what that looks like. And it is as intense now as it's been. And I think it's going to stay that way unless Kamala Harris really screws up. And that is worth billions of dollars. It's a massive advantage. It's not something Joe Biden had before the debate. It's certainly not something he's had in the last 3 weeks before he withdrew. And it's a massive advantage. And I don't know that Donald Trump can do anything to get it back. The only way he can get it back is if Kamala Harris gives it back through a series of errors. It's a massive advantage. It's a massive paradigm shift. And again, I look at a lot of coverage, national coverage and local coverage, and it is roaringly positive towards her. Favorable feature stories, favorable headlines, minimizing anything negative going on with her, and either ignoring Trump or being negative about Trump. I don't know what the fundraising's done in the last day, but every indication I have from talking to people is it's still going gangbusters, and that it will. And again, as you know, the campaign has said many of the people who gave first-time contributors nowhere near maxing out are trying to give every week. That means they've got a steady stream of money coming in. The fat cats are very enthusiastic too. In fact, the enthusiasm throughout the party, people say regularly now, it's reminiscent of Barack Obama 2008, but it has the added emphasis or added element of the party coming out of this Great Depression, not just from the debate, but even before, months and months of Donald Trump being ahead of Joe Biden in the polls. So to go from despondent in many quarters of the Democratic Party, despair and resignation that there'd be another Trump term, something they thought would be impossible, just a year or two earlier, has turned now into glee. I want to read you an email exchange that I was on with 3 Democrats who, if you'd asked them 2 months ago, would it be a good idea to swap in Kamala Harris for Joe Biden? I think they would have said no. I think they had a pretty jaundiced view of her capacity to win a general election. And I asked them how they're feeling about Kamala Harris. I'll just read you the exchange. Person 1, she can win. The tight time frame will help her. Person 2, agree. Every candidate is flawed. She has a shot, which it seemed Biden lacked, although he had a special appeal to seniors who do vote. Person 3, I agree. If things break her way, if she picks Mark Kelly and she has a good pool to choose from, she can actually win, which would just be a spectacular turn of events. Person 1, my God, yes, he is very solid. Then they share a text from Jennifer Senior, the reporter, who says, just got this text from a relation who works at the Biden-turned-Harris campaign. The past few weeks at work felt like walking to a funeral. This week feels like I'm at a wedding with an open bar. Then one person says, I used to talk to Mark Kelly a lot. He's such an impressive man. Person 2, very impressive and a decent man. Person 3, the chemistry there feels right as well. He will know how to make her better and work with her and respect her. That's just an anecdotal thing, but that's reminiscent, or it rhymes with everything else I'm hearing from Democrats. Enthusiasm and confidence. The party lacked confidence just a few days ago, and now the confidence is high and growing. I have indications, you can read about it in my book someday maybe, I have indications that the move to replace, to make the swap actually started even earlier than I had reported it. I think you may well see not just David Plouffe, but other Obama folks come in. And I believe those talks have been going on for longer than has been reported. I reported on Thursday that people were already vetting candidates, vice presidential candidates. I don't know yet how long that process went on, but I think this may have been in the works for longer than we thought. And that means, although there is some apprehension in Wilmington about who's coming in, who's going to have their power diluted, et cetera, it does mean that process may well be further along than we thought. And so the reformed campaign team may be able to get up and running quicker. The short campaign clearly benefits her. It means that all the negatives, which I'm going to talk about in a second, they just don't have as long to come after her. And there's a reality here, which is people don't really know her. We all think we know her, and some people do. But a lot of the voters who are going to decide election, they do not know her. They will meet her in a relatively short period of time. The Trump campaign, whether they were going to get a bounce out of Milwaukee and out of the vice presidential selection process and out of the assassination attempts, we all assumed that those would lead to a bounce. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen, in part because of the intersection of the changed event. And for those who believe that the timing of Joe Biden's decision was meant to step on the developments that would have benefited Donald Trump, we'll see. We'll see if someone can report that out. But if that was whether that was the intention or not, it may well have that effect. And I would say, based on what I know now, it is going to have that effect. So imagine the assassination attempt, the convention, the selection of the running mate, all handled in a way that would have maximized, you would have thought, to Trump's benefit, may mean nothing in terms of the polls. Speaking of the polls, Tony Fabrizio, Trump's strategist and pollster, put out a memo today, basically saying, don't worry if Kamala Harris goes ahead in the polls, it doesn't mean anything. Well, very un-Trump-like, for instance, for one thing, to put out a memo like that to say, show of weakness and acknowledging weakness. But also, we talked about this in the previous session, the psychological boost of Harris, if she goes ahead consistently in national polls and is close within the margin of error in the battleground state polls, that doesn't mean nothing. That will stoke fundraising, stoke confidence. It'll also allow the Democrats to work more closely with the national campaign and not be concerned about working with them. The 2022 paradigm, right? A lot of Democrats, when Biden was going to be the nominee, said, look at 2022, the polls showed Republicans doing well, but they didn't do as well as the polls suggested. Abortion and anti-Trump sentiment and some of these other issues, social issues, are going to be more important for enough voters than inflation, immigration, and crime and perceived weakness on foreign policy. Whether that was definitely true or not, probably just net more likely true with the addition of 2025, which has extraordinary traction around the country, particularly, but not only with women. Whether that's true or not, right now, the momentum, the confidence, the fundraising, the enthusiasm is sky high on the Democratic side and may now change the enthusiasm gap. That's one thing we'll be looking for in the upcoming polls. The question about, are you excited about voting this election? The Republicans have had a huge edge there. If the Democrats keep this up, I would be surprised if that changed, particularly if it's an exciting running mate pick well unveiled. So what's on the other side of that before you start booking your hotel rooms and buying your inaugural gowns for the Harris, Kelly, or whoever inauguration? What's on the other side of that? Well, first of all, most strategists I've talked to say it would be very smart for Vice President to go to the center. Wall Street Journal lead editorial in the paper tomorrow is all about the many issues they see where she could go to the center. She's scheduled to go to speak to the teachers unions conference in Houston on Thursday. I wouldn't imagine she's going to go there and come out for school choice. And so this question of can she go, does she need to go to the center? If so, can she do it effectively is a potential trap for her. Another area of potential problems is she may not stand her campaign up as well as she needs to. She may mess up the vice presidential pick. No matter how good someone looks now, the vetting is being done.
Look, at first glance, she is an attractive, compelling, lovely, beautiful woman. Right? At first glance, she is a compelling candidate. It's once people get to know her, and the shorter campaign definitely does work to her advantage. How long till people start to get to know her and become turned off?
An extraordinarily fast track, and that could be messed up. They may not be able to pull off the convention in short notice, and that could cause a screw up. She could go back to performing in a way and saying things that are potentially problematic, and getting her balance between appealing to the Obama coalition and the Biden coalition is something that, again, she could mess up, and her team could mess up. She's going up like a rocket now. If she hits a bump, the question is, can she keep it going? The main reason to doubt that this is in the bag for Kamala Harris is what I call the CBO factor. Clinton, Bush, Obama, three incumbents who were deeply unpopular and whose team said, if you look at our poll numbers as we run for re-election, we probably can't win. All three won. All three won because they did one basic thing. They made the alternative for the other party unacceptable to enough voters to be able to win. And Trump is now, and this is sort of, I don't know if anybody else has already made this point, I haven't seen it elsewhere. Trump is now basically the incumbent. He's the establishment incumbent, and she's the challenger who he is going to try to paint as risky and negative in some way. What that frame is, we don't know. We talked about last night, they tried 20 more frames today. They're trying lots of different frames. But I think the one they're going to go with, based on the early advertising and talking to Republicans, is that she's more liberal and more incompetent than even Joe Biden. And the fact is, if you look at her Senate record and you look at the positions she's taken and you look at the things she talks about, she's very liberal. Trump is not a perfect candidate, but he's going to try to make her, to go to Joe Biden's expression, Trump's going to say, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And they are going to try to paint that alternative as scary liberal, scary incompetent. It worked for Clinton, Bush, and Obama. And I believe that that's what this race is going to come down to. If she can paint herself as an acceptable alternative where people trust her to be commander-in-chief, people trust her with the economy, people trust her to be a strong leader, people trust her to stand up to her own party when necessary, then I think she'll win this election. But that's a big if, because not only is Trump and his team extremely skilled at defining people, but she's got a lot of challenges in those areas to prove that she's ready to be commander-in-chief, to prove that she'll be a strong leader, that she will stand up to her party when necessary. She doesn't have a lot of record in these areas. That's why I see the race tonight.
Okay, that's Mark Halperin. I'll talk to you